Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Whiskey and Weird. It's Wednesday, March 10th. Um, a week out of from St. Patrick's Day. Gonna do a little bit of Irish lore, talk about it. I've been learning a bit more. So I'm glad you're here. Not going to do anything next Wednesday because I will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day with my family. But yeah, welcome to Whiskey and Weird. I'm glad you're here. And hope you're watching now. You can watch the replay later. You can watch on YouTube. This is on YouTube. Good grief, my iPad. I have it on for some of my lore stuff, and it's really loud. Anyway, here I am. You can watch on YouTube, and you can also listen on your favorite podcast app after I do upload the audio for this every Wednesday night. So anyway, hi Sean, it's good to have you back. What are you drinking tonight? Because I'm certain you're drinking something. Oh, and before I forget, I think it was you that mentioned the grape, the screwball, and the grape soda. So I'm gonna try that. Gonna try that soon. And maybe in honor of my daughter's 21st birthday, which is on Monday. And it's going to be her first time ever drinking alcohol, right? Let's all laugh together about that. Anyway, I see Sean's here. Someone else is watching too. So say hi. Let me know you're here. Don't just be incognito. Let me know what you're drinking. As I said, it's March. And St. Patrick's Day happens this month. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to, to talk a little bit about some of the lore that comes out of Ireland. Hi, Jacqueline. Let's see. Sean is drinking Old Smoky salted watermelon whiskey with sugar-free Sprite. Wow. That just sounds like so many flavors in there. Like that, but it does sound actually good. It sounds kind of refreshing, really, with the watermelon. I bet that's really good. Very cool. So I'm always interested to know what Sean's drinking because he puts together some super cool concoctions. Hi, Jacqueline. I'm always happy to have you here, my sister. So, and I'll appreciate you chiming in a little bit. You might know some of this. So just before I dive into the whiskey, so Irish is part of our family's heritage. We are good old Irish Catholics. And our family is the Donahues, which they hail from the Cork area of Ireland. And we're what's the word I'm looking for? Not royalty, but they had a big castle there. There's a castle. Jacqueline's not drinking anything, but it's later there. It's a couple hours later where she is than it is for me. But anyway, Cork, never been there. There is a Donahue Castle, or at least some remnants of one. So I guess that makes me like someone pretty special, right? And my sister too. But we do have that heritage. It goes back pretty far. And what's funny is, it's the Irish Catholic that we can probably most relate to. And we drink like it too, my sister says. Absolutely. We do. That is true. Here we are, right? So, but in recent years, for me, I've become more more interested and feel more connected to to Druidry, which is not, Catholicism by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, Donahue Castle. I think I mentioned that, right? So Sean's family is from Roscommon. I've never heard of that. The Coors Irish rock band. Very cool. Very cool. I think there's so many of us in this country from Ireland and have heritage from there, right? But anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. But I was saying my heritage is from there. The UK, I just have a great affinity for all of it. I was born in England. I have the Irish heritage. I don't really have a connection. I also have Welsh ancestry. Not a connection to Scotland per se that I'm aware of, except that my current heartthrob, celebrity heartthrob, is a Scottish actor. You might know of him. He is from the show Outlander, and it's kind of hard not to love him if you watch that show, right? Right, ladies? Right? Can I get a what? Yep. You know what? It did, Jacqueline. Some of it actually derived a lot from paganism and just in general, even the Irish mythology. And I've been learning about this. Like, did you even know there was Irish mythology? I didn't. I did not know that there. I mean, there has to be, I suppose. Although, what would American mythology be? I wonder. But it's nobody knows about it. Like, I'm going to share this video that I watched earlier. It's about 10 minutes long, and it talks about why why nobody knows about it. But really, some really fascinating stuff. And one of the things that I took from that was the fact that it's kind of like all over the place. Like when you take Roman mythology or Greek mythology, it's very clearly defined and the divine lineage is really obvious. But with the Irish mythology, it's not like that. But we'll get to it a little bit. Yes, Jacqueline Sam Hewen, right? It's hard not to love that guy. Super cool guy and extremely attractive as well. And no, I'm not objectifying him. I'm just stating the obvious. So tonight I mentioned that I was going to do an Irish whiskey. I survive on a very small budget, and I found this at Total Wines and more. Let's add that because this indeed is not wine. But it's really pretty bottle. Can you guys see that? Like, I just loved it. I love the little crest on there, and it's just like a black bottle with silver. I was really drawn to it. And I was also drawn to it because it was only $23, like for real. So hopefully it tastes good. But 23 is my favorite and lucky number. So there you have it. I was looking up a little bit about it. It's a pretty new whiskey out of an Irish distillery. But the name Ballyhoo, it means like public extravagance, a big fuss, right? So probably what people might create when they've had too much of this. So here's my challenge. Those of you who are drinking tonight, every time I use the word Ballyhoo, you have to drink. It probably won't be very much because I'll forget that I said that, and I won't. Just like I forget to actually drink my whiskey after I do my tasting. But anyway, Ballyhoo. This is it right here. We're gonna have a little public extravagance on our show tonight. But let's get started. Let's kick it off. See how it is if I can get the top off. But yeah, so I'm gonna show you that bottle again. That's not working. There, isn't it pretty? All right, welcome anyone who's just chiming in to Whiskey and Weird. We're talking a little bit of Irish folklore, just because. So anyone smell? I always like to smell it from the bottle. Not a lot there. Can't smell a lot. All right, let's pour it in the glass. Oh, there's not much color to this either. So look at that. I mean, can you guys see it? Sorry, I'm really bad at putting this up. So really, you know what it looks like? It looks like I just peed in a cup. Totally. Hopefully it doesn't taste like pee in a cup. I know it won't. It won't, right? Smells like whiskey. Let's see. It's sweet. I have a feeling it's just, it's pretty young whiskey, right? Doesn't really. I'll have to look up. I don't think it's aged for a really long time. I'm not getting a lot. I'm getting a sweetness And I can really, when I take it in, I can feel it on the back of my throat. So it doesn't burn, but it's there. I think it's just going to be a really fun, easy whiskey to put down, especially if you're a new whiskey drinker. So let's just taste it now and see. I'm getting that, yeah, the sweet. There's a little caramely in there, which seems to be pretty standard early on. You know, when you have whiskeys that are not aged as much. So here we go. Are you ready? Is everybody ready? Here we go. Mm. Ooh, yeah. Thanks, Sean. I knew it wasn't very long, but it's been like a couple weeks since I looked it up. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've been drinking lately is cast for 12 or more years. A completely different experience, but not necessarily better, right? So thanks for looking that up. Sean said 4 years in cask barrels. So um but you know, the color can change. And he just added all this stuff. So let's put it up here and we can read it. He's my researcher. Thanks, Sean. But he does a little bit of this for work too. So let's see if it'll show this or if it's too big. We'll show it on screen. I'll read it for you. It says Ballyhoo is a 4-year-old grain Irish whiskey, which is finished in a port cask. I don't get a lot of port, I'm just gonna say. So the vanilla might be the sweet that I was getting, but it was a little more caramely. And yeah. See, this is why I don't read this stuff before, because I didn't get any of that. I think that that's where they're going with it. I think that maybe that's where they want, but I think it could probably sit a little longer. I think that those things start to come out more, right? The longer that the whiskey sits, just like with wine. And it changes the flavor. The taste actually changes. So definitely got the sweetness of what someone perceives as vanilla. But it's funny, you know, when you're tasting, a lot of people taste, you know, everyone tastes different. Like all of us sitting here today could taste this and we'd have a different experience to a certain degree. Caramel is something that I like. So I think, you know, when sweet, that's what and not vanilla. Well, in many areas of my life, I could be vanilla, I suppose, but that's not ever my first choice. I like something a little less vanilla, like chocolate or caramel. Yeah, they come out the longer it is, and it'll be stronger in certain things. But again, I don't read a lot about the whiskeys ahead of time because there's too much in it about what it should taste like, and I really like to try to come at it. But I did know that it was not aged for a long time. But I will tell you that there's not a lot of port. Now, here's my thought on this. Maybe if you're not going to age something for a long time, maybe there's a purpose in aging it in port, because that's a good, bold, rich flavor, right? Port wines. And so it probably kind of creates more of a taste experience within a short period of time. I don't know. Anybody with me on that? Maybe. But imagine if you are, you know, if this is finished in a port cask for at least a few years. So it says it's finished, but how long? That could be 6 months. I don't know. Maybe they told you on that. I'm gonna have to look that up. Finishing doesn't give you a lot of information about how long it might be there. But I imagine, wow, can you imagine if this had stayed in there longer? It's actually quite lovely. It goes down really easy. There's a little bit of a burn on the finish, which I don't mind because that reminds me that I'm drinking whiskey. And otherwise, I think a whiskey like this could be really easy to drink a lot of. But kind of a fun experience, you guys, to try to do something different than your average, you know, your regular Jameson whiskey. But I recommend it. I honestly, if I was just grabbing a bottle to hang out with friends, Yeah, that's what I thought, Sean. I was thinking it couldn't be more than 6 months, or else you'd be able to taste more of that in there. Thank you for looking up that information. So Sean says it's finished for 3 to 6 months in a port barrel, but that could be a very different experience, right? And maybe they'll come out with something that's being aged longer. I mean, I don't know that they've been around that long, and obviously it takes a while to age something for a long time. So anyway, it's good. It's not, not overly viscous, which, I find the longer something is sitting around there's a little heavier viscosity. So, yeah, not overwhelming, um, you know, taste experience necessarily, but it's quite lovely. And if you're just looking for something, easy to sip, this is actually really, if you're looking to try to drink whiskey neat, I think this would be a good way to start that. So yeah, so cheers, Sláinte. Hmm. So Ballyhoo, let's get to the Ballyhoo. We had the Ballyhoo Irish whiskey. Now we'll get to some of the lore stuff. Um, and yeah, this should be pretty fun. So I think we all know a little bit about this, and I started talking earlier before some of you were on, um, about the idea of the Irish mythology, which is really interesting. And sorry, I'm looking over here because I pulled up some stuff just to kind of guide me a little bit, since a lot of this is new to me. But the whole Irish mythology pieces, that there was, not a lot of divine lineage delineated about it, and so it's not, where you go to either, whether it's Norse mythology or Greek mythology or Roman mythology. It's pretty clear, and there's a layout of whose kids were whose, and this, and what their divine lineage would have been. But the Irish mythology doesn't have that. And I mentioned too, I have a video I'm going to share, which is really interesting, and I want to go back and watch it again. But it's explaining a little bit about what, some details and information about the mythology and why it maybe doesn't show up as much. But basically, this video is, it says, like, it's that stuff just happens. Like, there's no, it's magical, right? It just, a lot of it is like, okay, this guy jumped into the river and became a salmon, and it's like, just nothing ever happens with any kind of real reason, or you can't anticipate some of it. And so I want to actually read more about it, because it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, so if you guys, anybody knows anything about Irish mythology, now I was gonna try to talk about it a little bit more, but I'd have to do a little more studying, because I can't pronounce any of those names in there. I'd have to figure out what that would look like. Yes, you better take 4 drinks, Sean, because I've said ballyhoo at least that many times. So anyway, the Irish mythology, check it out. And of course, some of the lore would stem from that mythology, from the paganism, the druidry, that all these different aspects of early Ireland. It's really important to remember that a lot of the things that we believe today, or we've come to know today, are very much influenced by Christianity, and their interpretation of as Jacqueline mentioned earlier, just the pagan. Or she mentioned druidry and I mentioned pagan, but those rituals, they tried to translate them. And ultimately, what they were doing is trying to take that information and weaving it into what they were trying to teach, in an effort to actually bring people along, and seeing how they could kind of match up, in terms of how we understand things. Um, yeah, so they're really the same, Sean. What I've been reading, like Celtic and Irish lore, they're all pretty much the same. And when you read the different stories now, the Scotland is considered Celtic tradition too, right? Or but and they don't have leprechauns there, but they do have fairies, and leprechauns essentially are fairies that in time have been given kind of this particular persona. I'm not really sure where that came about. Very likely it came from our Americanized version of, of St. Patrick's Day, which isn't, 100% accurate, but it's accurate enough. It's funny, a lot of people get weird about that kind of stuff, how we have to do it so differently in America than how it's done in the country. But isn't that what America was about? Like, America was about coming here and doing things a little differently. And how can you, simultaneously honor your heritage and action yeah, Jacqueline, I think the it's all tied in. Gaelic and from my understanding is not, I don't know how they are separate, but in my research there, all the lore is the same. Jacqueline just asked about Gaelic, and I mean, Gaelic is a language and a culture, and I don't know, but they're all tied together. And when I was doing the research and just looking up stuff, it basically said Irish lore, which you could interpret as Gaelic, but all of that comes, Scotland and Ireland are all of the above. So I don't know where that separates itself and if there's a time frame. But everything that I was reading referred to Celtic lore and not Gaelic. So I wonder if and the Gaelic, of course, being the language for sure, that's what they speak, is Gaelic. Anyway, so that's a great question, and I would love to look into it more. And I don't pretend to be an expert on this. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to dive into. But they're all related, and I think Gaelic, of course, being the language that is spoken, right? And I don't know where that kind of intersects, to be honest. But it's all it really is all one and the same, and maybe it just happens to be where how it started to show up. So because I've never really heard, I always hear it in terms of Celtic tradition, not Gaelic tradition, but maybe that's just because I'm not paying attention. I don't know. So but Gaelic is the language, right? That is, and there's a version of Gaelic spoken in Scotland and a version spoken in Ireland. They're very much the same, but also different. Anyway, so and that's why I can't pronounce any of the names in the lore, because they're really interesting. And none of them, well, most of them, actually, the Irish, from what I've read in Irish Gaelic actually looks or sounds more like it looks, whereas Scottish Gaelic, like, they'll have a word and then pronounce it, and you're like, how do you get that out of those letters? Like, and I think the only way I figured this out is from reading Outlander, and then, hearing people pronounce it. I'm like, no, that's not how you pronounce it, but that's how you pronounce it. So anyway, we could go round and round about all sorts of things. But getting back to like Irish lore and that kind of thing, and Catholicism, Christianity, but namely, ultimately Catholicism, they took what was already there, right? And they used it. So many of the traditions that Christianity uses did not come from, they didn't just pull those things out of their arses. They used what was already the foundation of beliefs by the people that they were trying to bring along. And so, for instance, the shamrock. So the shamrock has been like the flower for a long time, but it was a big deal for I'm going to pull this up. Hold on. For a big symbol for Ireland, outside of how it became a Catholic one, right? So they believed that shamrocks hold greater meaning or purpose. Druids believed shamrocks were sacred and kept evil away. And so these are all cultures that existed before Christianity came in, right? Celts believed the number 3 to be sacred, which those of us who are into like numerology and things like that, the number 3 actually does hold a lot of really valuable information. And then, of course, when St. Patrick, who is the patron saint of Ireland, and that's because of all the Catholics, Christians, whatever, that live there, Protestants too, and we all know what happened around that. But that he used the shamrock, which was already an important part of their culture, to explain the Holy Trinity. So, it goes back way further. He used something that was already important to the people there to explain this new idea, what the Holy Trinity, and since then has become a symbol of that to most people. But the shamrock was important in cultures dating way back in Irish traditions. So I think it's important to remember that. It also talks in here about St. Patrick and how there's the legend that he drove out all the snakes. So, but what science tells us is that in truth, snakes probably never lived there at all because the climate doesn't support it. So, it's kind of interesting, the stories that we tell ourselves and what we believe. And religion, of course, has always been used to try to explain things that nobody can explain, whether they're, so is mythology, right? So all those things are about, let's put some meaning or some definition on something that we can't really otherwise explain, which is, this whole connection between like the supernatural and religion, angels, and all of these things that, well, let's create a framework around them so they don't seem so daunting or so scary, and so that we can maintain some control over all of it, right? So anyway, topic for another evening. Changelings. So fairies are such an interesting topic in the supernatural world, and they're a big part of the lore all over, is particularly Scotland and Ireland. And they they show up in so many different ways. Now, if we go back even to like our talk about Bigfoot and aliens, and the many different perspectives that people have on what those things are and how they show up to us and why do they show up to us. And fairies are really similar, and a lot of people believe that fairies are actually it, and all these other things that we experience are just versions of fairies. And they can be really good, but they can also be really mischievous and bad if you don't honor them, so and they come in all form. Like if you go look at pictures of fairies, those of us who have little girls, fairies are all pretty little girls with long flowy hair and flowy dresses, or they're Tinkerbell. But a lot of the images and kind of the imagery that comes out of the belief system is that fairies aren't really very cute at all. They're kind of funny looking. Lisa, hi, Lisa, welcome. She says, I remember the parents of my high school friends going on and on about fairy circles. Yeah, I participate in conversations and with groups on Facebook with people that really believe in all of that. And I don't not believe, because I think that it's all kind of entwined, right? And they all have something to do with showing up for us for whatever reason. And I'll get back to that thought if I remember in just a minute. Ballyhoo, by the way, Ballyhoo Whiskey right here. Jacqueline says, I love how they depicted it in True Blood. I've never watched True Blood. I should probably do that. Yeah. There's a lot of superstition. So Lisa says they would not step in the fairy circles and warned us not to also. Yeah. So, there's certain areas of the woods that people won't go. People who really honor the fairies will always make little altars or little gifts to them when they go into spaces. Even here in the States, this happens all the time. And some people do that for Bigfoot too. There are people that believe that Bigfoots are just a version of fairies. Now they're really big, but that's how they show up. that gets me to one of these others, is that the idea of changelings. So there's a thing called a puka in Irish lore. And interestingly, I read 3 different things about it, and they all kind of showed up differently. One kind of described it as more of a wolf-like creature. The other, it was more like a bear. But in a nutshell, it's a creature that can show up in different ways for different purposes. And ultimately, what I've come to believe, or not believe, what I've become aware of in terms of people's belief systems, I should say, that fairies are changelings, that they're going to show up to us however we need them, or however they feel like they need to. So Lisa, yes, similar to Skinwalker. And you bring up a really, really great point, because the almost interesting thing about lore is that it pretty much matches across the board. So if you go, it's like we talk about Bigfoot. If you go to pretty much any culture, they have some version of Bigfoot, Sasquatch. There's some version of fairies. There's depictions of aliens. I mean, these things are everywhere. And I mean, there's got to be a reason for that, right? There's got, all myth, all lore is rooted in some element of truth. And that's the thing ultimately that is so fascinating to me. And why I'm always so interested. There's something there that's probably really obvious and right in front of us, but we don't see it. So skinwalkers, same thing, changelings, people, they show up in different ways. Now, I don't remember what episode it was, but I talked about the ghosts. I think I brought it up on the show, but I had this kind of thought about why it is that people will have different experiences with ghosts in the same places sometimes, or how they'll show up differently to them. And I think ultimately all of these things show up to each of us in the way that we might most easily be able to perceive them, and 2, or with a message in a way that provides information to us, if that makes sense. But we have to be really willing to acknowledge, why am I in a house, and me and this, I see this shadow figure all the time, and this person sees this. It's obviously the same thing. Why are we seeing it differently? Or why does this particular thing show up? And I think something like fairies could be the same thing. Some of us might be more inclined to see a Sasquatch, and that's how it's going to show up to us. And maybe ultimately it's just about believing in something bigger than we are. And I don't know, but so changelings, fairies in and of themselves, I think that's, can do, there's so many different things to different people. But they kind of have a power, which is really interesting, that people feel drawn to them, that people feel inclined to gift them, and also fear them, which is a really interesting thing. And it's the same, it's not any different than how people perceive their gods, really, right? Or sometimes Bigfoot, all of these different things. So it's just really fascinating. And I think that again, that's another thing that fascinates me about these topics, is not just the topics themselves, but the human behavior around these topics, and why people. I mentioned, I think it was last week, or the week before, just how frustrating it is to me to be in a community where we believe in all sorts of really strange things, and there's so much judgment around that. Like if you believe a different strange thing than me, then you are crazy. And I don't understand, because it's all rooted in the same place, I think. And it's all coming from the same place. And I think that our human existence comes from that very same place too, if that makes any sense. So anyway, changelings are interesting, and there's very much a part of Irish lore, as they are any lore that you'd be inclined to pay attention to. The Banshee, this one's just a really interesting one. and it's talked about a lot. And again, banshees are fairies. A banshee is a fairy that is meant that, well, it's interesting because a lot of times I've heard the story that if you hear a banshee, then it means someone you know is going to die. The lore suggests that that if you hear it, then it means someone you love has already died, which is kind of two different things, right? Um, and would kind of invoke a different emotion, one being kind of panic and fear and the other being sadness that, okay, somebody's gone. So the banshee being this really, terrifying, screaming fairy that's warning you about, someone's death. Any thoughts about that? Banshee is probably one of the most common things outside of just the regular fairies, but in terms of that, and banshee is there banshee? So banshees are a big deal in the Celtic traditions, and just all over the UK, right? But does anybody know of a similar creature? Like, I can't even think of something here, like around here, that like in our traditions that we would believe in. I don't know. That would be one that's a little different kind of warning of death, and maybe I'm just not thinking of it. So chime in if you guys can think of something, because that would be different. It kind of goes against my whole theory that all of these things they exist, across the board in different lore and traditions. Nobody's chiming in, so maybe I'm not the only one who doesn't think of that. I was thinking about these belief systems that people have around things, and the whole changeling. Um, uh, okay, Jim, thanks. Jim's gonna think about me, think about us as he's passing the liquor aisle. Everybody, have fun there. Um, uh, so changelings, like the belief systems around that. So not only are they, these animals, but there's also this belief that fairies can come, babies, the whole baby thing. Now this happens in Outlander. Those of you who watch that show, they have an episode where that's a little bit about this notion that fairies will sometimes come and steal babies and replace them. So if your baby is sickly or dying or whatever, then it must mean that a fairy came, that the fairy stole your baby and replaced with some, other version. And they would take the baby back out into the, whatever, into the wilderness, and leave them there as an offering to try to get their own baby back. I also read some things where they would they would burn their babies in the fireplace, thinking that their real baby would come back if they destroyed that baby that somehow got replaced. And how, just how sad and how terrifying to think that we would be so engrossed. But the truth is, people are still today, right now in this country, believing in things that make absolutely no sense. So but at least I don't think we're burning our babies in the fireplace. But that's a really deep thing, and it's all rooted in fear, right? It's all comes from this fear-based stuff, which is where religion, mythology again came into play. Was, well, let's take this fear and let's run with it. Let's do something with it. Let's try to control it. Baby back Jacqueline. Oh, good God. That's a really bad joke right there. That's a really bad. Jacqueline just posted baby back. We all know, right? I got my baby back. Yeah, that's awful, Jacqueline. And you're not even drinking whiskey. What the heck? Ballyhoo. So yeah. The other thing, I don't know if this is really a lore thing. It didn't really come up. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Oh, there we go. This is perfect. This, you know what? This could be like our mascot, right? Sean's, here it is. Here's a good one for us. Sean says, the the Clurican. I have no idea how to pronounce this. A mischievous fairy in Irish folklore known for his great love of drinking and a tendency to haunt breweries, pubs, and wine cellars. Well, how about not distilleries? What the heck? But that could be a possible mascot for Whiskey and Weird, right? That's pretty cool. That so the other thing that reminds me, I was reading about the different the gods and goddesses, and I need to read more because it's pretty fascinating, but I haven't had time to dive into it as much. But it was talking about, and I think the fairy lore comes directly from this, is that they didn't have like a goddess of love and a goddess of a god of war, all those things. They were just more like random things, which and even possibly lends itself to some of the patron saints and things we have. So Saint Bridget, of course, would be one, but they were really specific kinds of things that they were gods and goddesses of, as opposed to love and war and kind of these big overarching things. So just a lot of really cool stuff coming out of that. But I like that. That's a good one. So Sean is clearly doing all this fun research in the background while we're sitting here, and I appreciate that. So I appreciate the contribution because it's fun, and when we're all learning a lot more. But anyway, okay, I was just gonna tell a story about. Oh, I know what it was. Not really a story, but the topic of elementals, and I guess they're referred to as elementals, and they're a big deal in the UK. Like there's a huge belief system around their presence, and probably they're fairies. The same, maybe it's the same kind of thing, but they're really they run around in the bushes. They can cause mischief, but they can also be supportive and doing other kinds of things. So they're out there, but elementals are a big deal, and of course they're connected directly to the elements, right? Which is they're outdoors. They don't tend to be inside. So I don't know how that works specifically, but I know of some people. I've experienced people who have claimed to see what we would probably call elementals, both in the UK, but also, here in the States, and that they're often, all of these things kind of lump together. So like we have a place here, Mount Adams, and it's a really common place for UFO sightings, really common elemental sightings, really common Bigfoot. So going back to this whole notion that these things are all connected in some way, and we just haven't figured out. And maybe it's just that we perceive them the way we're more likely to perceive them, to see them. So that Bigfoot that you see could also be the elemental that someone else sees, or the fairy that this other person sees, or the alien that someone else sees. I don't know, but it's really, really fascinating to think about all of it. But a lot of interesting stuff in the Irish lore. Most of it people are pretty aware of, I think. But it'd be fun to dive more into the actual traditions of the mythology. And it had like 4 different stages of it, that you could probably spend days reading books about that stuff. But I was excited about that. I honestly never really considered Irish mythology, right? And that's because we see everyone else, all the other stuff on TV all the time. So anyway, I wanted to share with you guys, this is not Irish folklore, but last night I had another UFO sighting. No joke. I was waiting to do one of my ghost tours, and I get there like 20 minutes early, and people don't usually arrive till like 2 minutes before the tour. And so I was waiting and just kind of staring up at the stars. I could actually see some stars downtown, mostly the brightest ones in the sky. And at one point I see something in the sky again moving. It was as bright as the brightest stars in the sky, and it was just moving. And like I probably saw it in the sky for 5 seconds. I looked up, it was there. I watched it maybe 4 or 5 seconds, and then it completely vanished again, like that thing I saw during the day. And the weird thing about both when this thing vanished and also when the one I saw the other day vanished, the best way I can describe kind of what it looked like was almost like it went behind something, if that makes sense. And so for a minute, it was a night sky, but there weren't any clouds. I could see all the stars, and it actually happened right near another star. So I knew there wasn't a cloud there for it to have gone behind. It was clear skies, and it literally just disappeared. It wasn't a satellite because it was far too big for that. Yeah, it wasn't a satellite. I've seen many, many, many satellites in the night sky. This was not a satellite, and I would not have been able to see it in the downtown Seattle. You can't really see satellites down there because they really don't reflect that. And it was really, really bright. I don't think that's what it was, and it wouldn't. I think I would have been able to see it farther in the sky and where it was and what time. I don't know how the sun would have been reflecting. If the sun would have been on the opposite side of the earth. I don't know. Maybe, but I don't think that's what it was. It seemed really, and again, when I saw it like disappear behind, it was like it disappeared behind something. Like it was really bizarre. Like there, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, I've never seen anything like that. And I'm a heavy stargazer. So, I mean, I think Jacqueline, it was a great suggestion. I don't really believe that's what that was. I don't think that would be a way to explain that, knowing what I know about how the sky works, right? And it was big. It was bigger than what any satellite I've ever seen before. So, but then again, I'm not a scientist, so never seen anything like that. Wasn't a shooting star because it wasn't fast enough. Just really interesting. And unidentifiable as of yet. So, I mean, and I could probably get on the internet and start looking, but it is really intriguing to me, and also not surprising that I would have two of these kinds of experiences recently and in a short amount of time. But I wanted to share you guys that and see. Jacqueline, I will certainly look into your possible explanation, but that's not making sense to me as far as the duration of time that I saw it and where I saw it and how I saw it. So I don't know, but I appreciate the suggestion, right? Still UFO right now because I don't know what the hell it was, but weird. Anyone else have any weird things since our UFO sightings? Because sometimes I feel like they know we're talking about them. What do you think? I don't know. But anyway, leprechauns. Oh, we didn't talk about harps. There is a little folklore about the harps, but definitely the whole putting, the whole notion of harps putting, people to sleep to serve different purposes. There's a number of stories around that kind of stuff. And so that's part of why, part of what I was looking into this, like, why are there certain things, why are there certain images that come to mind? That come to mind, and a harp. I don't know about you, but like you have beers named after them and you have pictures of them on beers and stuff. So why is a harp? But there's a lot of stories about them. And again, namely about putting, creating emotional responses using harps. So that's an interesting thing, and does seem to come directly out of Irish lore. So just kind of interesting, fun stuff. Just some stuff you can talk about as you eat your corned beef and cabbage next Wednesday night, which again is not really a traditional Irish thing, but it is an American Irish traditional thing. And I think that that's perfectly okay. Like I said at the beginning, people came to America to do things differently. So it stands to reason that they would do it differently while also trying to honor their heritage to a certain degree, right? So, things like soda bread, potatoes, very much a part of that history. The chocolate Guinness cake that my mom makes, so not a part of that history, but the reason for celebrating, because it is the bomb stuff. It's so yummy, you guys. Anyway, let's see. Sean just said that, I'll pull this up, Sean, so people can see it easily later. Vegas has had a string of UFO sightings this past week. Red flag. Oh yeah, red flag. I know all about that as a military brat. So yeah, it totally could. That could very much be an explanation for that. Extra things in the sky that aren't usually there. But the truth is, there's been a lot more. I mean, I think I mentioned last week when we were talking about UFOs, when I looked up that even right here in Washington State, there's been quite a few just since the beginning of February. So, it feels very plausible that for whatever reason that I could have seen one last week and this week too. One during the day and one during the night. So kind of weird, but it's all kind of crazy. And maybe it's just a bunch of ballyhoo. I don't know. Drink up, folks. All right. I'm thinking I'm pretty much talked out tonight. I'm tired. Yes, Jacqueline says our ancestors came over due to the potato famine. Yes. And I think that's why, many of them, that was what was happening. And also the religious things that were happening. Right. So yes, I did know that, Jacqueline. Thank you. So cool. Happy St. Patrick's Day, y'all. Whether you are Irish or not, we tend to celebrate it pretty big in this country because it's fun and it's a reason to drink beer and whiskey, right? So I'm not going to be here next Wednesday. As I said, I will be celebrating with dinner, my corned beef and cabbage and potatoes and carrots with my parents, followed by the delicious chocolate Guinness cake. I'll tell you all about it the following week. I don't know yet what I'm going to talk about, but we know that I'll think of something. Yes, Sean says it's one of his favorite days. Honestly, it is. It's just fun. It's just a fun day. People have an excuse to drink alcohol. And what more could we need right now? It's been like a freaking year since we got locked up in our homes. So anyway, happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy March. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm always glad to have people chiming in. Thanks again, Sean, for being my researcher. Wish I could pay you. And thanks for being here. Those of you watching the replay, thank you. And remember, you can always watch here live on Wednesday nights at 7 or via here at Facebook or on YouTube. And also you can listen in later on your favorite podcast app if you know someone who who might be interested. I don't know, but just a couple last thoughts. Jacqueline asked when our mom actually started making that. I don't know, probably like in the last 5 years, but it's really good. And yeah, Chicago, there's some other cities that dye the river or the fountains and stuff green. It's pretty crazy. You know what? But people need that kind of fun and crazy sometimes, don't they? So I say go for it. Go for it. Have a lot of fun. Drink some whiskey, some Irish whiskey, maybe some ballyhoo, or it'll be Guinness for me too. Post the recipe for the cake. I will absolutely do that, Sean. I will get it from my mom and I will share it because it's really good. And we do it gluten-free because we don't eat wheat. So, and it's equally beautiful. So I will do that. I will post that. I'll post the video about the Irish mythology. That's pretty cool. It's like 10 minutes. It's just kind of a snippet about it, but it might pique some interest for some of you. And stay in touch via the page. If you have ideas about things you want to talk more about, if you want to revisit something, you guys don't hesitate to let me know. And if you ever have a topic that I bring, excuse me, there's my whiskey. If you ever have a topic that I talk about that you're really passionate about, let me know, because it's fun to have a conversation right here and I can invite you on and we can chit chat and talk about cool stuff. So don't hesitate. I'll have you on in a minute. And that's kind of what I want to do. I want people to come on here and talk with me. So anyway, I love you weirdos. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And I will see you in a couple of weeks. Be well.